So first of all, thank you everybody for coming in today. Me and Rhea have been so excited about this event in all the weeks that we've been planning it. And it really is kind of this perfect intersection of everything Rhea's been working on and I've been working on this past year with NYU Econ Mannmukti. Just a few logistical things before I hand it off to Rhea. We are recording this call, so I understand if any of you have classes, like we are more than willing to share this with you after. I know a lot of you did express that you want to be able to be involved in all parts of it. If you have any questions before you potentially have to leave, feel free to text me, drop it in the chat, any of that good stuff. And we'll definitely, try to make time at the end in the Q&A portion of this to do that. But besides that, we're super, super excited to get started. And yeah, Rhea, take it away.
Yeah, we are so excited. Thank you so much, Nithya, for hosting tonight with me and just planning this all out. It's been a pleasure and an honor. And yeah, as Nithya mentioned, we both kind of founded two clubs at NYU around the same time. Nithya's from NYU Economics. I started a chapter at NYU of Mannmukti, and we really felt like all three of our panelists tonight represent the absolute perfect intersection of our two clubs. So we cannot wait to jump in. And I am so excited to finally introduce our three panelists tonight. They are Trisha Sakhuja-Walia, Sahej Kohli, and Sydney Moondra. Yay, so excited to have you all here. And to start off, we'd absolutely love to give you all a chance to just give a brief introduction of yourselves and let everyone know who you are.
Should I start?
Go ahead.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Well, hi everyone. So excited and grateful to be here. Thank you so much for organizing this, and a special shout out to Rhea. Her and I grew up as family friends. So to see this and to see you organize it, it makes my heart happy. So so a little bit about me. I'm the CEO at browngirlmagazine.com, and yeah, we have been around for the past almost decade, which feels crazy to say. We've done everything we possibly can to empower South Asians living in the diaspora through content. And then in the past 2.5 years, I officially took the plunge and went full time, because Brown Girl was something that I was pursuing as a side hustle for the past 7 years before going full time. And I knew that there was something magical about the work that we were doing over at Brown Girl. And I always saw myself pursuing it full time, but never knew that it could be possible to do, because we had always just run it as a blog, and we did it as a passion project, not realizing that it could be a business. So anyways, 2.5-3 years ago, I finally got this insane opportunity to go full time, and that's exactly what I did. And in the past few years since going full time, we have ventured outside of the world of Brown Girl, and we founded our very first summit called the Slashy Summit. A slashy is someone who has a full-time but is pursuing various side hustles. So like many of you are slashies. I know I've been a slashy forever. So that's what we founded 2 years ago during the pandemic. Of course, we pivoted from the summit to Slashy Connects, same concept, but everything digital. And then also around the same time, we released our first ever merch called Ladki Power. Simple, it stands for girl power. And of course, it's a perfect alignment with Brown Girl. And then last year, we also released our very first print book called Untold: Defining Moments of the Uprooted. It's a collection of 32 stories written by South Asian authors. All of them have written this story for the first time. Many stories have seriously gone untold, hence the title. And we've covered, honestly, everything from mental health to divorce, deportation, colorism, casteism, you name it. We've tried our best to cover it in Untold. So so the big vision and goal at Brown Girl is to create a beautiful ecosystem that all interconnects with one another. And yeah, that's it.
Sahej, Sydney, whoever wants to go next, go for it.
Sahej, why don't you go for it?
Okay. I don't know how I'm going to top that. Trisha is so badass, pardon my language. So I'm Sahej Kohli. I am the founder of Brown Girl Therapy, which has existed for almost 2 years in June. I'm a former journalist. I worked as a senior editor at HuffPost for about 7 years before deciding to pursue a second career in mental health. And so now I'm a second-year graduate student at GW in DC, where I'm studying clinical mental health counseling, and I'm working as a counseling intern, i.e. a therapist in training at a local clinic. Brown Girl Therapy, such a passion project, but yes, just for the sake of this conversation, it's not, I was a slashy, as Trisha uses that language, created that language. I was a slashy for the first a little bit over a year. So I was working full-time at HuffPost while being in graduate school full-time, while building Brown Girl Therapy for the first year full-time. And I was a newlywed, but thank goodness my husband is very patient and believes in all the work that I'm doing. Last August, I decided to finally go full-time with Brown Girl Therapy. And it's been such a wild ride, especially with the pandemic. Brown Girl Therapy is a community for children of immigrants. So it's, it started off as a platform for South Asian women in mental health, to talk about mental health, but it's quickly grown into a more macro community for all children of immigrants. And when I pulled the community in December, we found that 100 countries were being represented. So while we're not a monolith, there's still so much overlap between the experiences across cultures, across generations, across identities and races. And so it's been such an honor to facilitate the conversation for such a large group of people and to grow the platform, which organically grew very quickly over the pandemic because a lot of people were craving connection and community now more than ever. But as a child of immigrants, a lot of us were moving home, live in multi-generational household, had the only facets of independence, school, work taken away from us. And so a lot of our bicultural struggles were more prominent than ever. And through this last year, I've also been able to do a lot of corporate speaking engagements. So I do a lot of speaking engagements for Fortune 500 companies where I come in and talk about diversity and inclusion, especially from an immigrant lens. I talk about culture and identity and productivity and workplace wellness. And then I also do keynotes at higher ed institutions where I talk about the intersection of higher education, mental health, and identity. I myself had a very unconventional college career. I did not graduate in just 4 years. It actually took me a lot longer to get my bachelor's, but I say that because I think it's really important to understand the pressures that are placed upon us, the pressures to pursue a certain kind of career. And I am now in my early 30s, and I feel like I'm finally doing the thing I want to do and building the thing I want to build. And I just want to remind everyone here that there isn't a timeline for doing this work at all. So I will leave it at that and pass it on to Sydney.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to ditto you. I don't know how I'm supposed to follow up after you two incredible women, but yeah, my name is Sydney Moondra, and I'm CEO and founder of Build to Bill. Build to Bill is also a community platform. Essentially, think of it like a dynamic version of Humans of New York, where people of South Asian descent can log onto our platform and kind of share their story about their mental health. And we've had several people taken over, and it's just so beautiful to see people own something that has been so traditionally taboo and not talked about, and then be able at the same time to have our team kind of support them through that process and then receive the unconditional love that our community is able to support them. So that's been beautiful. It was born about, I think, a little shy of 3 years now. Similarly, I also had a very non-traditional college career. My third year of college, I had to withdraw, which was very filled with lots of complications, as you can imagine, just the standards and the expectations for my parents. And then also, I think we tend to be kind of hard on ourselves as well, trying to adhere to the norms of education and professional success. And so it took off for a year. For mental health reasons. I have PTSD. And so that year was especially formative to me, and realized how much in that time I benefited from the really close heart-to-heart conversations that I had with friends and family. And I owe so much of my healing to those conversations that I've had. So it was kind of just like a light bulb moment where, there are so many people that are silently suffering with XYZ and don't have a space or a person that they can go to feel understood and listened to and heard. So why don't we build it? And so that's what I did in the latter half of my year off. And it kind of just blew up, and it's been wonderful now. And I have a team that is also dedicated and invested to this work. And it's just so incredible to see how the vision has kind of morphed and changed as more people put their hands and hearts into the work. But I also am technically what you would still consider a slashy. I also do healthcare research in the same field. So field of empathy, resilience, burnout, which has been especially critical of an issue to look into with COVID, and how healthcare workers are burning out at, record levels. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you guys so much for sharing. I think I can speak for a lot of us on this call that it's so inspiring to hear from all of you. And so many of us here are part of, again, the South Asian diaspora ourselves. And to have these conversations publicly and hear from you all is already, so great. And that's kind of where I want to start is, prior to the work you're doing now, were you involved in work related to the diaspora or the South Asian community in general, or was this kind of the first project where you took on that step? I can volunteer, I guess. Sydney, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I don't think well, let me say this. I guess I've only been out of college for 2 or 3 years now. And I think part of where I realized that there's so much to capitalize on our shared experiences in college. I don't know if you guys have like a South Asian organization, but I was heavily involved with mine in college. And just more than that, you leave college knowing that there is so much you can do for that particular community. And that's where I guess I started to get involved in the South Asian space. Having that community led to a lot of intimate discussions and realizing that we had so many things that we're commonly struggling through. And so graduating, it was really important for me to continue those connections, not only people that I met in college, but other South Asians that I met in the workplace and out and about and in DC even. And so those relationships that I built in college were pretty critical. And I think for those of you that are at NYU currently, I would say you are in the ideal place to start to kind of get your roots into the South Asian diaspora, or yeah.
I can jump in next. I would say that I have always had a foot in the South Asian community, but had several years here and there where I didn't feel like I belonged and didn't feel a sense of acceptance, especially in the Sikh community that I have now kind of come full circle back into again. But Brown Girl Therapy really was born out of this idea that I felt really isolated. I had just married a white man. I was the first in my family to marry outside of race and religion. I'm the first in my family to do a lot of things. And I was living in New York at the time. This was 2 years ago before we moved to DC. And I was just struggling with my own bicultural identity crisis. What was I doing? What were the decisions I was making? How did my family feel about it? How did my husband feel about it? How do I feel about it? How is it going to impact my future family? And how do I reconnect with my roots as a 30-year-old at that point? And, is it too late? And am I going to be judged? And I did feel judged by some people. And so for me, it was one of those things where I really wanted to find that community, and Brown Girl Therapy really was born for a selfish reason. I created it because I wanted to connect with people in the community. I wanted to find a sense of belonging with other South Asian women who feel like they were also, their limbs were being cut off and for lack of a better metaphor, from their roots. And so, it's obviously grown into so much more than just that, but I will say that, I always thought that there was a right way to do this work, that I always thought there was a right way to be Indian, to be South Asian, to be Sikh, to be a woman of color. And if I've learned anything in the past couple of years, it's that there really isn't, and we're all just trying to figure it out as we go. And so community really is more important than anything else when you're trying to explore your identity, unpack your mental health struggles, reconnect with yourself, make your community smaller, but have it so it's quality over quantity, and really find those connections where you feel like you're understood and you belong. And that's essentially what I tried to do with Brown Girl Therapy. And I feel like it's opened so many doors for me to meet amazing women. Trisha, Sydney are two of them that I've connected with just by doing this work. But there are so many more of us who are in this space who really want and value these kinds of connections, and finding our own spaces within the South Asian community.
Trisha, I think you're muted.
Oh, of course I'm muted. No, I was gonna say, you know, I'm grateful to have met you, Sahaj, through the work that you've been doing at Brown Girl Therapy. And I know Sydney and I, we've just casually connected, but through this, this is a good reason for us to connect further. But, you know, similar to you both, I've been a little bit in and out of the South Asian space, but you know, I think my big, you know, entry into the South Asian world was when I co-founded the Desi Club back in my high school. I went to a brand new high school. I was one of the first graduating students, Queens High School of Teaching in Glen Oaks. And I didn't realize that at that time when I was co-founding Desi Club, it would basically be, you know, a really good, you know, overshadowing to me starting Brown Girl many years later. So yeah, so I did it back then for the same reason that Brown Girl was created, right? It's to create space, to create community in the same way that Sydney and Sahaj are referring to it as well. I definitely created Desi Club selfishly because I was hanging out with the kids in the Greek club. And as much as I love baklava, it wasn't the same as hosting a fun Desi, you know, Bollywood centric show. So I honestly did it just so I can like dance and hang out with my friends. And that kind of continued on. And when I got to college, I went to Stony Brook University in Long Island. You know, immediately the first thing I did was try out for the dance team, Bilana, and I sucked so hard at it. Because they were way too classical. So then I was like, you know what? All I've got now is SASA. So thankfully there was the South Asian Student Alliance. And, you know, from day one, I like started just hanging out with the kids on the e-board and I started becoming friends with them. And I was like, how do I get on this e-board? And a couple of years later, you know, ended up getting on that e-board. I also ended up starting my own dance team because I couldn't dance, but I could manage. I was always a good manager. So I went around the country managing the dance team, Gatra. It no longer exists, unfortunately. But yeah, so, you know, honestly, I always found my own little ways to connect with the South Asian community. And when I didn't see an opportunity, honestly, I created it for myself. And that's really why Slashy Summit was also created, right? I wanted to be on panels and I wanted to talk about being a Slashy and I didn't see anything out there. So I was like, well, why don't we just do it ourselves? And so I think that's the beauty of us South Asian millennials is that we've truly paved the way for South Asian kids in the diaspora. And I always tell all my Gen Zers at Brown Girl, don't ever forget it. The millennials definitely paved the way so that you guys can hang out on TikTok.
I mean, yeah, I think we all have to agree with that. The millennials absolutely paved the way for us.
No shade.
A little bit of shade, but that's okay. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us can agree. Everything that you all just kind of mentioned definitely resonates. And I definitely at NYU, like I think Sydney said, that it's such a great place to kind of start building that community. And it's also so interesting to hear how like high school and college experiences have really shaped you all today even. So it's really, really awesome to hear about that. And I think like now, if that's okay, like we kind of just want to delve a little bit more deeper into your current careers and talk a little bit about that. So as you all know, we called this talk Trailblazers in the South Asian Diaspora, because Nidhi and I, when we were kind of brainstorming, we really thought about what kind of spaces you all take up in this industry or space in your careers. And I think that one big question that I have is kind of like, what made you take that leap to start this organization, especially as South Asian women? I think it's such an incredible thing you all have done, but I'm sure the process wasn't easy. And so I wanted to also ask what kind of your mission has been with the work that each of you are doing.
I can start us off. It is not easy. I will say that. I also think that, you know, when we think about entrepreneurship and we think about mental health care, especially as South Asians, for both things, there tends to be this narrative of like, just get it done, just do it, hustle, get it done, get over it, go to the next thing, keep going. And I think, you know, part of the work that I try to do with Brown Girl Therapy, especially through the speaking engagements in corporate environments, is to remind people that there is room for tenderness and care in all of the work that we do. We just have to kind of carve it out for ourselves. And that's not something that I really knew until recently. So even in the last 2 years of starting brown girl therapy, I've burned out. I have burned all the way out. And that is because, you know, I read a tweet that said the pandemic took everything away from us except work. And like, if that is not the truest thing for children of immigrants or South Asians, that's like, it's like compounded like crazy just with the pandemic. I think I forgot the point of this rant that I'm going on, so I apologize. But in terms of starting and like taking the leap, you know, again, I think it just goes back to like, I saw something missing from these spaces and I just wanted to fill it. And I think Sydney and Trisha would both agree that that's like part of the reason why they started both of their endeavors as well. And I think it's hard because we're all people of color, we're all South Asian, we're all marginalized in our own ways. There's a slew of intersection of identities in this Zoom room, I'm sure. And it can be really hard when we've been taught to kind of keep ourselves small, stay in boxes, do the thing that's expected of you. And I think all three of us, you know, I look to both of these women on the panel with me, and I would like to think I'm the same way, where we just kind of said, no, like, we're going to just build the thing we want to build. And if it doesn't work out, we'll figure it out, right? We were responsible. We've all kept our full-time jobs. We've all tried to do this the best way we know how to make it work. But at the end of the day, for me, it really was, what's the worst thing that can happen? I've created a page, there's 3 followers, you know, me, my husband, and my sister, and then nothing comes of it. But, you know, there is a little bit of, if you have passion for something, you should do it. You know, these spaces wouldn't exist without one of us saying, like, I want this to exist in the world. And we think about how many white people create the same thing over and over and over again, or have the same conversations or write the same books. And for me, it's like, we should also be doing that. There should be thousands of us saying the same thing, starting the same thing, sharing the same narrative, because our voices deserve to be heard. So I'll leave it at that, because I could just go on a rant forever.
I cannot preface that more. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Sahaj. Currently, we're raising Brown Girl. Do you hear me? We're raising capital at Brown Girl, and this is the first time we're doing so, because every single thing we've done so far has been totally bootstrapped, you know, pre-revenue, you know, obviously stretching every dollar and penny I possibly can to make things work. So now that I'm raising capital, I cannot tell you how many times angels and VCs are asking me the same question. Well, what about so-and-so who has a media platform and they're also South Asian? And I'm like, my answer to all of them is, do you never go to Burger King because there's a McDonald's down the street? Like, I literally want to give them shade every single time they ask me that question, because I can't handle it. Like, and my answer all the time, I'm like screaming as I'm saying this, I'm sorry, but my answer all the time is yes. Actually, as a matter of fact, that founder is a friend of mine. And guess what? I love that company. I love that media platform. I'm grateful that media platform exists. You know why? Because that takes the burden off of me and Brown Girl, because Brown Girl is not the answer to it all. And we can't be the one place for everything. You know, I'm grateful that Build the Dill exists. I'm so grateful that Brown Girl Therapy exists, because we can't fulfill those spaces. And even if I tried, I can't do it really, really well. So we deserve to create, just like Sahaj says, 1 million Brown Girl pages. I think someone was just asking me, I think just yesterday, about this other Brown Girl page. And they were asking me if that page and my page can share the same video content. And they were like, is that a conflict? Is that okay? And I was like, of course not. I was like, dude, send me the video clip. Like, we'll share it, you know, and maybe send me a different 30-second clip. Cool. But I would love for that page to also share it, you know, and there's more than enough of us to go around, and the market is big enough. So I think that we need to continue to make a marker for ourselves. And now we're finally in a place where we need to prove that this market is big enough to be at scale. And so that's the work we're doing. But yes, to your question, the challenges are so paramount. I mean, just to firstly to think about starting a business, and then to think about how to make it sustainable, and then to think about how to make it profitable, and then at the same time to think about how to raise capital while still accomplishing the goals and the day-to-day work. It honestly is a never-ending job. And I quit my 9-to-5, but I took on a 24-hour job instead, at very little salary. So yes, there are so many days where I'm genuinely excited and happy and so grateful, which is a big chunk of the day. But then, of course, like anyone else here, I go through the insane, down parts where I'm sad and lonely and, feeling in bouts of depression at some points, because I want to make things work, and I do feel the burden of making it work for Brown Girl. And so yeah, that part does get really nerve-wracking and scary. So but we're here, we're doing it.
Doing it really well, I will say. Like, these two women have just been so inspiring, and I think I can't reiterate like the amount of times there is a large amount of like imposter syndrome that comes into starting something like this, where you do think like, is the content that I'm making, is the organization that I have really making a difference? But there is so much discipline in kind of drowning out the noise. And really, like, when I stepped into building Build to Bill, it was really like, I wasn't trying to build a business, I was trying to build something that fulfilled purpose. And so I think every endeavor should start like that, because I think that will lead to the largest amount of success. And we're doing it the smart way, like Sahej said. It's not that we quit our 9-to-5s and just dove head deep. And if you have the means to do that, by all means, like, if that's what works for you, go for it. But like, there are feasible ways to build as you go. When you take kind of like the intersection of like entrepreneurship and mental health, I think I just laugh sometimes, because they're so combative in a lot of ways. Because I think I grew up, at least, hearing so much about like the hustle culture and like, take no breaks and grind, and like, you're not going to be successful unless you work really, really hard and sweat and pain and tears. And I did not understand, or didn't want to comprehend, or didn't want to believe that success had to come at the cost of my own well-being. And that is not at all the case. And so I just want to stress, if you are thinking of starting something, like, it should not come at the expense of your well-being, or your happiness. And also kind of detaching I've had a really interesting introspective conversation and dialogue with myself over the past couple of years, kind of trying to separate this work and the numbers apart from myself, worth, and my identity. Because I think, as much as our hearts are in what we're doing, like, we have to be very mindful of the relationship we have with how our business is doing, and how we, like, what we think our worth is as a person. Because that's just been something that's really challenging. But really going into it with no expectations, not thinking that putting out content expecting to blow up overnight. And I think that's so challenging, especially in this generation, as we're growing more and more on the technology front. It is so easy to believe that success while building something needs to be immediate, needs to be within a couple of months. Like, the numbers mean everything. It's been a really intentional effort trying to detach those from the two, but it's been so worth it. And I think what has kept me sane, and what has also kept me relatively successful. So.
Thank you, guys. I want to switch gears slightly. Around a year ago, I saw this post on Brown Girl Therapy, actually, and it talks about this feeling that I think I talk to Ray about all the time, and with my friends, about even just feeling like we can complain. Like, sometimes some of the things you guys are talking about, I almost feel like I'm not even allowed to say, as like the child of immigrants, and everything my parents have done for me to even go to school at a place like NYU and be here. And, it's like, what have I done in life to feel like I'm in a position to complain about that? And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. Like, how were you guys able to come to a place now where you feel like you can have these conversations? I mean, first with yourself, which I'm not even sure I'm there yet, and then with your families and friends around you.
I can start us off if that's okay. I'm going to try not to go on another rant, but no promises. Gratitude shaming is so common in our community. And I think, especially like when I say our community, I mean all children of immigrants, second gen. And I think it's this idea that and I see it a lot in the community. I see all of us, I do it to myself. I'm not separating myself from this at all, where I will gaslight myself out of what I'm really feeling because of what my parents have gone through, because of what my parents have done for me, because I'm supposed to like make it worth it in some ways. And it is really hard work. I mean, it took a number of years of therapy for me to really untangle and detach my worth from that. And it's still a struggle. Like it's not, I've come to accept that guilt, and I call it thriver's guilt. So this guilt where like you have the resources, you pursue healing, you have the ability to do things your parents never did, or they might have family members across the world who don't have access to or resources to do. And it's very similar to survivor's guilt, when someone else passes away and you were in the same car and you didn't. It's a very similar dynamic where we will then tell ourselves like, why me? Why should I pursue the thing I want to pursue? Why should I have the privilege? Why should I complain? Why should I not? And what we know about chronic guilt is that it keeps us small. It keeps us in the box. It keeps us in the lane. It keeps us, it keeps us seeking approval from other people. It keeps us from being able to really understand what our needs are, what our emotions are. And there are a lot of things that play here, right? Like it can be how your family dynamic was when you were growing up. And for a lot of immigrant kids, we weren't taught how to emotionally express ourselves. We weren't taught to understand our emotions. We were taught binary thinking. Certain emotions are bad. Certain ways of acting is bad. This is good. This is bad. This is right. This is wrong. This is all. This is nothing. And I think, the first step to really unpacking that is understanding that two things can be true at the same time. You can pursue something that is really healthy for you, really good for you, that makes you happy, and not everyone in your life is going to support it. Not everyone is going to be happy about it, and that can include your parents. And you have to identify for yourself whether or not it's worth taking that chance, whether it's still worth doing that. And a lot of that work is getting clear on your values, your own standards for living, whether you've adopted those from your parents. I feel like I'm going on a rant on like a how-to. I apologize. I'm very passionate about this topic.
This is incredible. Yeah, I feel emotional listening to you speak, but continue.
I just feel like, I just wish I could like, I don't know, like just have it tattooed on my head for every child of immigrants to see that like all of our struggles are so valid. We all have our own intersection of privilege and oppression. And I think what we really struggle with is because our issues have never really been highlighted, because we don't see ourselves in the mental health space, because we don't see ourselves reflected in self-help or in entrepreneurship or whatever spaces you want to occupy, it can feel like we don't belong, and therefore our feelings just like shouldn't exist. But like, that's not true. Like irrationally, I think we all know that's not true. It's hard to get our mind to really, our heart, I guess, to really come to with that. And I think, I don't even remember what the question was, to be honest. I'm sorry. I just think like, it's just really important to me that everyone here, if you leave with anything, it's that just because your parents struggle doesn't mean that you can't struggle too. I really did forget the question, so that's all I have.
I think that was a solid answer. I will say that. And I definitely empathize with so much of what you said. And speaking from personal experience, I think, you definitely don't need to have, though it would be nice, you definitely don't need to have parents that are supportive when going into this line of work. I was still in college when I started Bill to Bill, and they were not thrilled. Like they were actively very upset about it. And, it's a leap of faith, going public about something that has been so taboo. And I think being really intentional with your self-care and what kind of ideas and language you let replay in your head is super important. And I think more than anything else, if that would be nice, your family doesn't, you can get sources of support elsewhere. Let me just put it that way. There are really intentional relationships you can make with people. I think also with the beauty of internet makes that a lot easier. But being able to isolate and identify those people that will lift you up, that in combination with, yes, lots of therapy. Therapy does help kind of, therapy in the sense that providing yourself a space that you deserve to kind of unpack all of the really tough stuff, whatever that space may look like. I know therapy can't necessarily be accessible to everyone, but building time and a holding environment for you to think about the things, process your emotion, feel all the feels is something you deserve, and something I think when going through this process you honestly need. I'll stop there.
I mean, you two both just said it so eloquently. I think the only thing I can add from my perspective is when we were considering to incorporate Brown Girl as an LLC, this is when the original founders, were still around. We had received this phone call from Oxford Press in London, and they wanted to purchase 2 of our stories for 150 pounds, and I was freaking out, and they wanted to see our tax ID paperwork, and I had no idea what a tax ID was. I was in college and I was pursuing pre-law. I was trying to get into a master's program for public policy. Everyone in my life knew I was going to law school. At that time, I had tried taking the LSAT like twice already. In total, I took it 5 times. But I went to my dad, who is a CPA, and I was like, listen, like, can I get a tax ID? Just like really casually, like didn't even give him contact, because I thought it was just like a quick thing that I can get online. I could just Google tax ID. And he was like, why do you need a tax ID? Then I kind of go into it and I'm like, well, Oxford Press reached out. They really want to buy a story from Brown Girl. And at that time, he like did not want to hear anything about Brown Girl, because he knew that it was already taking away time from my LSATs. And he already knew that I was hardcore partying in college. So like he was just not for it at all. And so, so that was probably the first, big time when it came to Brown Girl that I was like, I'm not doing right by my parents, and by forming an LLC means that I maybe will be straying away from this path that they have put forward for me, which is LSAT and law school. And they're obviously paying for everything, and they've put a roof over our heads, and they have made gigantic sacrifices to be here, as all of our immigrant parents have done. And so that was the first time that it really, really hit me, and I definitely felt so guilty. And I remember all those crazy conversations I had with my parents and how disappointed they were in me that I wasn't spending as much time as I should to go towards law school. And then that guilt has definitely kept up with me in many ways throughout. In 2019, when we hosted the last Slashy Summit, that was probably the first time where, when my parents came and saw everything, I was like, in the back of my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, they finally get to see Brown Girl for real, like in action, not online, but truly in person with hundreds of people. So I felt the guilt kind of like, stripping away, but it's still definitely there. I do want to prove myself for my parents. And then I think maybe Sahaj can relate to this. I think getting married and going full time is a whole nother layer of guilt. I got married and then went full time with Brown Girl. So there's that other level of guilt there too. So I think proving yourself as a child of immigrant parents is so tough. And I think it's going to be something I'm going to work towards for like the next, 50, 60 years. So there's no clear cut direction or answer or trajectory for it.
Yeah, I just want to jump in too, because, sorry, Sydney, did you have something?
No, go for it. And I think all of our minds are bubbling with great things to say. You go for it.
You go first, because mine's like, I'm veering off a little bit, and I think yours is like related to what Trisha said.
It just in terms of, familial support, I don't want to scare any of you guys. There is hope of it getting better. I went from my mom strategically cropping out parts of my TED Talk that addressed my mental health to 3 years later when my dad sat with me in a Sony TV episode and talked about it all. So, I mean, it's hard and it's difficult, but with very intentional conversations. And I think a large amount of, empathy and understanding for, like Sahej was saying, like the set of circumstances that they've had to grow up with have just been completely different, right? Like when I almost think of it as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They were just operating at a lower level, right? And now we have the privilege to think about self-actualization and our feelings, and we're not in survival mode. So I think going into the mindset, my parents are not superhuman; they're people, and giving them the space to grow with me along the process was really helpful.
Yeah, I also want to highlight that there is hope, and it is a really long process. I had such a terrible relationship with both of my parents for a solid 8-10 years when I was coming out of high school, and then moved to New York and through my 20s, and all of the stuff that I experienced, and needing to get my own mental health care. And there was just a lot there. And I think being able to get more intentional on what was important to me, and how I wanted to live my life. And that didn't mean without my parents, right? I really wanted my parents to be included in that, but just getting clear on what the agency was that I had in the relationship. We can't be responsible. We are not responsible for our parents' happiness. We are not responsible for taking care of them. And I mean their well-being in the sense of like their emotional stuff. Of course, everything else is like up for debate depending on where you are on the filial piety scale, which I will leave at that. But and then you also have these feelings of like, I want to make it worth it for them. I love my parents. I want to have a relationship with them. And you can get caught in this cycle of like not knowing how to have these conversations. And I know, Nithya, one of your follow-up questions to when you asked this was, how do you even have these conversations with your parents? And I think now more than ever, I think there are a lot of resources where we can normalize these conversations through like listening to a podcast or watching a Bollywood movie or watching, something else, another movie. Like my dad likes, dramas and stuff. And so I'll watch something with him that has a mental health storyline and then be like, so let's have a conversation about this, this character. And it doesn't have to be this thing where it's like, can we sit down? Can we have a big talk? Can we like unpack this? Because that can often be a lot scarier. I also have a theory that if you take an immigrant dad for a walk, you will probably get him to open up. It is like a theory that I have just found to be true for a lot of people. So take your dad on a walk and maybe you'll be able to talk to him, but talk about it in a way that they understand, right? So they don't often have a lot of the language that we have. And so you need to really use language they would understand. Some immigrant parents, because the medical field is so respected and mental health is not, think about it in terms of research, connect the somatic symptoms, the physical symptoms, the medical care with the mental health care. And then, two last comments I say with caveats that obviously not everyone's family is the same, but our parents did the best they can with what they know and what they were taught. And a lot of their fear, a lot of their assumptions and like, not supporting us or not knowing or understanding what we're doing is rooted in a very real fear. They had to struggle, they had to chase security. And so a lot of times when I, first started Brown Girl Therapy or even wanted to go full time, my dad was just like, how are you going to make money? How are you going to be okay? Like, how are you? And that wasn't a like, yes, he didn't always have the nicest way to word that. But for me, I was able to recognize, okay, he's scared. He's scared for me. My dad is scared for his daughter and he doesn't want to have to worry about me. And so I was able to address those fears. I was able to say, this is how I can make money. This is my happiness. Part of the conversations I've had to have with my parents that have been really difficult, but really important is recognizing that they're not going to be here forever. So it's like, when I introduced them to my white boyfriend, now husband, for me, it was like, if you don't like something about him, I will not marry him. I want you to be supportive. And I know that you're not going to like the fact that he's white, but if you can name something else that has nothing to do with his race that you don't like, I will not marry him. And they were not able to come up with anything. And we were able to have this conversation where it was like, I'm going to hopefully live a long life, beyond my parents being here. And I want to be happy. And I want them to trust that they've given me the skills to understand what that happiness is and to really think things through before I make choices. And so maybe that's helpful for someone here to think about how you actually have these conversations with your parents.
Wow, thank you so much for that answer. I don't even remember the question either, but it was actually so insightful, and I know I really needed to hear a lot of what was said. So thank you so much for all your responses. So I think we're going to maneuver a bit into our Q&A portion, and we got a few questions from our community followers on social media. And one of them is, how have your personal journeys in self-development and mental health been affected by building out Brown Girl Mag, Brown Girl Therapy, and Bill to Bill?
Yeah, I can go ahead. I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier before, but I definitely can double down on it. But I think there has been so much practicing of judiciously sanctioning where my energy goes. I think it is just so easy to get caught up with the numbers and the growth curve and all of those things that are really important to think about in terms of a business and scaling it. But really detaching it from your own self-worth and your identity takes a lot of active conversation and reflection on your own part. I have really questioned often, am I doing something of purpose and of worth? But it's been really helpful to ground me in the idea that if there's even one person that walks away with some benefit, then it's immediately priceless. So I think there are just like certain mantras and certain people that I go to just for those reminders. Just being fully aware. I literally have a list on my wall of people I know I can talk to and things that undoubtedly can reconfirm that this work has purpose in order to like pull me out of the dark place, because burnout is really easy, and being hard on yourself is even easier, especially when we have such high expectations from our loved ones and for ourselves. And my parents, my dad especially, asks me on the daily, like, oh, so like what's the follower count now? And I'm like, okay, but it hasn't grown that much, like please. And he's like, so it's just, after a phone call like that, I need to revert to my saved album on my phone of a message that I got from someone that really touched my heart. So shifting the metrics that define success for you. You may think they may be likes and shares, but if you find something that's a little bit more heart-filling, you'll be much better off.
Trisha, do you want to go next? I feel like I've talked a lot.
Yeah, sure. I can. Honestly, that was so beautifully put, Sydney. I appreciate that so much. It's a good reminder for myself too. But in similar vein, it's really tough. Of course, we do dig ourselves into a hole. I definitely do. I'll be really candid here. I was applying for a new apartment with my husband this past week, and this is the first time I applied to something being self-employed. And it was really tough on me. I was insecure like for the past 10-15 days, like we're not going to get it because of me, and thankfully we got it. But the whole like 10 days I was just like, it's going to be me. And we do that to ourselves, and not realizing that the likes and the revenue and the salary and the shares that's just one part of it, and it's really about the community that you're building. And so I have to constantly tell myself that Brown Girl is building something that's bigger than me, that's bigger than the dollars that are coming in, and I need to continue doing it. So yeah, I think my go-to mantra is that it's bigger than me. And when I continuously work on something that's bigger than me, I feel motivated to do it. But yeah, and then there's some days where that doesn't help at all. So I'm grateful that I have a support system. I have a team that is just, beyond, that I'm so grateful for. And of course, I think the one thing that probably keeps me the most grounded is a really, really close knit of friends. I love that I can escape from the Brown Girl world. And with them, it doesn't matter if Brown Girl's done X, Y, Z or not. I am just me, and I'm just Trisha with them, and that always just grounds me so much. Actually, I used to work at Pizza Hut in high school. So my best friend, actually, funnily enough, she just sent me a screenshot where my contact name, underneath it said Pizza Hut on it. And she like literally just sent it to me yesterday. And we were talking about something, I don't remember what it was. And she was like, I can't believe you're still Pizza Hut in my phone. And I was like, you know what? Thank God I am still Trisha from Pizza Hut on your phone, because that's what we need. We need to separate ourselves from this world and this community, because Brown Girl is 24/7, but I'm not. And so separating the two does help me. And yeah, it takes a lot of effort to do that.
Oh man, definitely all of those things. I think one of the ways that I might be a little bit different from both of these women is that I am still doing everything by myself, and I do not recommend it. I am just doing everything for Brown Girl Therapy alone, and it is exhausting. And you know, when the pandemic hit, I didn't realize how, I mean, this last year has been a blur for me. And I know it's been a blur for a lot of people, but I have barely even spent time with my husband, who I live with in this small apartment. And I think one of the things, just to be really transparent, that I'm really learning is that we can't do this by ourselves. We don't win, you don't win an award for doing something alone. And I, for some reason, I think a lot of us have that mindset. I definitely do, where it's like, don't ask for help, which is so funny because I'm a therapist, and it's like, of course everyone should ask for help, but it can be hard, and it can be hard not to take that as a personal failure on your part for not being able to figure everything out on your own. The one thing I have paid for is an accountant, because, you know, Trisha was talking about the tax numbers, and I'm like, I'm 32 and I still don't know anything about any of this. So it's very complicated. But you know, another part that I think has been really prominent for me lately has been imposter syndrome. And just as Brown Girl Therapy has grown really exponentially, I think people tend to be like, oh, she knows what she's doing. She knows what she's talking about. She's got it all figured out. And like, I'm just a human. I'm a human woman who has no idea what is happening, and I'm trying to figure it out alongside everyone else. I also am really paralyzed by my imposter syndrome. I'm waiting for someone to just like open the curtain and be like, we caught you. You do not need to be here. I am also dealing with burnout. I'm also like have random days where I'll just cry for no reason because I'm like that stressed out. And I think it's really easy when you see people who are doing work you might want to be doing and think, well, how do I get there? Like, what do I need to do to be that person? When in reality, I think everyone here is already enough to start something, to do something, to make a difference. And that's something that I really grapple with, is like, I think I'm still waiting to become that woman that people are like, oh, what you're doing is so great. And I'm like, wait, me, like the person behind me. And just the, you know, the idea of representation and also scarcity mindset is such a big thing. I feel like I've started to struggle with, like, you know, I am doing it alone, but also I don't need to do everything. Like I don't need to say yes to everything. I don't need to commit to everything. And to be totally transparent, I actually, for the first time, said no to something, and it was a really big, it was a TED Talk opportunity. And like, you know, I'm sure people are like, why would you say no to that? And I don't have time. I truly do not have time. And I felt pure relief after I said no. And it's such a hard thing because, of course, you know, my parents are like, why would you say no to that? It's such a good thing, like this and that. And I'm like, I know, but if that opportunity came now, hopefully it'll come in the future. And we have to change our mindset from like, this needs to all happen right now, the opportunity is not going to last, to like, you're building something sustainable. It's like we're all essentially building heritage organizations, heritage companies that are going to live hopefully forever, be passed down. I want Brown Girl Therapy. I want Brown Girl Mag. I want Dilda. I want these to be passed down for generations and exist and be in this space forever. And you can't do that if you're just living on this treadmill where you're just running. And so I've really, I mean, I say all of this as if I know what I'm talking about, but I really struggle with it too. And I think it's just something to keep in mind when you're trying to figure out what you want to do and how you want to do it.
Thank you so much, guys. We have a couple minutes left. And again, I can't thank all of you enough for being so vulnerable yourselves and like really speaking from the heart. And I guess the last thing I just want to ask is, do you have any advice you want to leave us with? I know all of you were, Sydney especially was not in college too long ago. And yeah, anything you have to share for us, I think I want to listen more than I speak.
I think for me, the biggest thing, I didn't have a conventional college career, but I do still have my community of Brown friends that I just like, we've come and go in each other's lives, but they are definitely like, they came to my wedding, and they're definitely just sources of support are the most important thing. It's really important, like, and you know, really connect with people, and growing in connection with people is a two-way street. So really, like, we have to absolve ourselves of these like white supremacy values of transactions and thinking of people in a way of like, what can they do for me or what makes me smart? Instead, it's just like, having that space, feeling psychologically safe around people. Like these things are so important. And then the only other thing I would really say is it's okay if you change your mind down the road. Like you don't need to have it all figured out right now. If you're interested in something now, go after it and go after it with everything you've got. And then if in 5 years you decide you don't want to do that anymore, that's okay. You know, I'm a second career person. I'm just, like I said, I'm in my I guess early 30s, but feels like mid 30s. Maybe it's mid 30s. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but early 30s, and I'm just figuring it out. And I think, you know, it's there isn't a timeline. And I think for a lot of us as South Asians, we are, you know, the perfectionism mindset, the comparison trap that we all get tied to, our parents get tied to. We compare ourselves to our peers, we compare ourselves to everyone else. We don't need to be in competition with each other, and there isn't a comparison. Like, just go after the thing you want to go after now. And if you change your mind down the road, that's okay. And I think that's really something I wish someone had told me, that I didn't need to have it figured out in college. This is really the time for you to explore and just try new things and do things just for the heck of it, rather than like it looking good on a resume.
I love that, Sahaj, so much. Kind of, you know, in a similar vein in a lot of ways. I would say I think the one piece would just be really to kind of, sounds cliche, but like lead with love. And I mean that in two ways. I think leading with love in the sense that, you know, your friends and anyone who's a small business owner that you support, and you know, even influencers or content creators or people that are trying to start a, you know, small new hustle. I think there is so much benefit in holding a space for them, and showing your support and showering them with unconditional love. I mean, I cannot emphasize how life-changing and healing and restorative it is when you have a genuine heart-to-heart with someone, where, you know, they can just feel your care and empathy exude. So leading with love in that space, but I think also turning that inwards. Be easy on yourself. I think especially when starting an endeavor like this, it is so hard to want to get everything perfect before you start. But I promise you, I don't think any of us had like a line by line 10-page business plan before we started. Oh, heck no, not even close. Like if you just need to start, or else there's a good chance you may never start. Whether it be, you know, the first 3 posts that you have and you don't know what's going to come after that, like just do it. It doesn't need to be, you know, you can cross all your I's but dot your T's in a week, you know. But I said that backwards. I said you can cross all your T's and dot all your I's in a week. You know, but just, you know, recognize your own capacity, give yourself time to grow, operate on a realistic, you know, timeline, because you are young. You do not need to hit success by a certain age. And I don't know, just give yourself a lot of love in the process, because it can be difficult.
Oh my gosh, you two have seriously, you know, covered it all in such a profound way. I think I walked away with so much from you both. Sydney, I'm so grateful that I've been able to hear you chat, because I'm such a fan, and I cannot wait to connect further. And of course, Sahaj, you already know I love you. So, but I think the only thing I would say is, you know, I know NYU probably doesn't make it easy to have lots of fun, but but to be honest, like just make sure you use your time and whatever remaining time you have in college, especially during this pandemic, to form those bonds and those friendships that will then take you further when you graduate. Don't leave college without a core group that you can truly depend on, because the folks that I'm still the closest to are the folks I went to college and high school with, and they get it and they understand what I'm going through, and they'll always be there for you. So I think beyond the career and the resume and the extracurriculars, truly walk away with a set of friends that you can call your own, because you'll want them once you graduate from college for sure, no matter what career you choose. And then the final thing that I would say is, because we are all so sitting inside of this like comparison competitive world, as Sahaj and Sydney is saying, that instead of feeling that someone is in competition with you, just reach out. That's it. And get rid of that, that barrier, and ask for not to pick their brain, because I can't stand that, but ask for some sort of a collaboration or some partnership, or hey, like, I would love to do XYZ with you. Would you like to do it with us? Like, I'm thinking of doing this campaign for Pride Month or for AAPI Month. Can we do it together? So that has always gone so far for me. Instead of thinking that the community is in competition with me, well, why don't I just reach out and work with them? And I'm grateful that hundreds of people reach out to us at Brown Girl, but I have genuinely made an effort to reach back out for XYZ partnerships or collaborations or whatever it may be. It could be something as simple as going live with someone on Instagram. It's become so much easier now to connect. And yeah, so those are the two things I'd say.
Amazing. Thank you so much for leaving those little bits of pieces of advice with us, but looks like we're out of time, which is really unfortunate. But I wanted to end by just expressing my gratitude to everyone here. I think like you three have been such an inspiration to me personally, and I've been following all organizations for so long, and it's a huge full circle moment for me. Trisha, I've known her since I was like a little baby, so it's just like crazy to host an event together. So it's just been an honor to host this event with our incredible panelists. And thank you to everyone who came out tonight. We will absolutely send this recording and post it on YouTube. And yes, my mother is here.
Hi, Auntie.
It's just so much fun. But thank you again, Trisha, Sydney, Sahej. It's been an honor. And yes, have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Y'all, have a good night.